clicker. Hi guys, I'm Britta from MTV, and my role there is to keep us close to millennial digital behavior and emerging trends and technology. Will be a clicker for the presentation. Is this it? Okay, great. So again, I'm sorry about the technical snafu. My name's Britta, and again, my role at MTV is to keep us close to millennial digital behavior and insights. Today I'll present to you some new findings that we've just released called Millennials Decoded, 4 amazing new insights within that, as well as a short film. And around 3:15, I'll also be available to do some Q&A, which I'm really looking forward to. So Millennials Decoded, let's dive in. Just a baseline what MTV considers millennials, they're those born between 1980 and 2001. This is the largest generational cohort in American history, and their influence is only beginning to be felt in terms of culture, technology, politics, you name it. But you can't really talk about millennials without discussing their hugely engaged relationship with technology. Why is this? Right at the moment in the mid to late 90s, where the growth of consumer technology, consumer products within the digital space began to really reach volume. It's the exact same moment where millennials were reaching adolescence, just beginning their adolescence. I'm a geriatric millennial, sort of at the older end of the spectrum, and I remember this period very closely. And so, you know, their identity as digital natives is so closely entwined to this moment. And adolescence being such a formative period of time, they're really totally intertwined with technology. And if that doesn't prove it, just the basic usage statistics that we see, and shout out to Pew, one of our favorite resources, by the way, for all of these, 100 texts a day, 100 online videos a month, and they're actually connected in aggregate a total of 20 hours a day, because you can really see how important technology is to millennials if you aren't already aware. And they also are happy to say, badge of honor, my generation is the most digitally savvy. Again, so closely intertwined to their identity as a generation, and something that they see as having a strong advantage versus other generations before them. So what's really happening for millennials? I think anyone with a smartphone in their pocket today understands that feeling of digital convergence. My real life and my digital life are beginning to intertwine. And we understand that millennials, because they are so digitally native, are probably the first generation to be experiencing this from that formative adolescent stage, and therefore are really leading the way in terms of developing the norms culturally, socially, communication-wise, that will help us all become successful digital citizens within this converged landscape, which is emerging. And you know, that's really what we wanted to study. But before we could jump into a dorm room and say, hey, millennial, tell us about your digital culture, we actually had to sort of think about a really smart approach that would get us the depth that we need. So our form of inquiry was actually just classic intimacy valencies that humans have always experienced since day one. Myself, those closest to me, friends, which of course, as we know because of Facebook, is now a very different word, and then the broader world. So the insights I'll share with you today actually line up directly across those. Curated Me speaks to how millennials develop and curate, truly curate in a very fast-paced way their identity in this dynamic digital age. Publicly Intimate, the next insight, speaks to the choices that millennials make around how they communicate when they have so many different choices for platforms that are available 24/7, but also many shades of gray in terms of whether or not they're public or private. Next up is likeaholism, and this really speaks to that feedback loop that millennials are quite strongly entrenched in, almost a bit of a gerbil wheel. If anyone in the world can like a photo you post within a minute, that feels pretty good, but it also can create a bit of a cycle that we're seeing. And finally, Digicat is the last of our insights for today, and that really speaks to the norms and somewhat rules, etiquette that millennials are co-creating together. There really is no Emily Post for the digital generations. They're working together to create these ways to be a successful digital citizen. So first up is Curated Me. Millennials, based on the way that they grew up in terms of the celebrity culture, the fact that they've been marketed to since they were pre-verbal, they're very, very savvy about branding and publicity. And we really understand that they're actually using those principles of branding and publicity that are probably pretty well known in this room to control and manage their online reputation and identity. So every day they're really becoming their own brand steward, essentially, lining up against the values that they espouse and curating the me brand, if you will. And the primary place where this identity curation is, of course, happening on Facebook. It happens elsewhere, but Facebook is really the first calling card for this generation. Probably not surprising. But what does it mean? What are we really talking about when we're talking about the millennial identity? It's really that best slice of themselves. They're not omitting anything about the full identity they have. They're really just choosing that best slice of themselves to put forward. Or as Mallory here says, online, I'm 100% positive version of the real me. So she's just taking the best of herself and putting that forward. Now that means different things to different millennials, of course. Photos especially are very, as you saw with Mallory's photo, but here is a great example, photos are extremely important to this broadband-powered generation. They are airbrushing daily life. Here's Alexis. She's a librarian. I think this is her first job out of school. She was maybe 21, 22. You can see the photo on the left is the original, and she's actually used a digital tool called Picnic, which is a web-based free version of Photoshop, essentially, is the easiest way to describe it. So because she's a librarian, those beer bottles are gone. She also cropped out the random, in millennial speak, that guy in the top left corner who popped out and jumped into her picture. And you'll notice everybody's got a bit of a beachy glow in the right photo, and you actually can apply makeup, tan, you name it. For someone who's fair like me, I love the tan feature personally. So you can see how photos are really extremely important in how identity is reported, but that's not the only dimension to what they're doing. You can see Cameron here. He identifies as a party guy. And also, we were looking for archetypes like this to try and help us understand the types of people you would find online, but we didn't find quite archetypes. We actually found what we're calling lifestyle templates. It's a loose list that varies from millennial to millennial, social group to social group. And really what the lifestyle template is a brand essence or brand identity, a set of values that the millennial brand curator will actually espouse and then organize all of the content, whether it's text posts, videos that they're posting, all of it under this banner of what they consider their brand values to be. Pretty fascinating stuff when you consider Cameron's about 17. And the one thing that's to kind of prove the best slice point a little bit further is that Cameron, although he's shown himself as a party guy, and he certainly does his fair share of partying, he actually is spending 4 to 5 hours a night on homework. But he's not touting that on Facebook. It can kind of show you a little bit, bring that to life, that slice, that best slice of the self that they're choosing to curate toward and omitting a little bit of the extra details to keep focus on their brand. So in terms of brand relevance, I think the biggest takeaway is active, constant, dynamic curation of the brand. I'm sure all of you have a really great sense of what your brand values are, your brand's identity and strategy, but significantly, in this very dynamic digital space, we can borrow the millennial strategy of adding content, adding different posts, connecting with others that share your values, and emboldening and sort of bringing more life to what your brand means. Next up is publicly intimate. How do millennials make communication decisions? What platform will they use? Millennials have been around since the launch of basically every amazing communication platform that's been launched digitally in the past 10 years or so, and they really understand what platforms are best for which circumstances, completely optimized communication lifestyle. And not only that, but they really do manipulate the language that they use, the actual verbiage they use within these platforms to get what they need, to carve out privacy, to have a better experience. So we'll look at that. All right, crazy chart, I know, but the best way I can bring it to life is how will a millennial actually make a decision about what platform to use in what circumstances? The easiest way to bring it to life is the phone call. So you can see that phone call is in the private and real sector. And any time that we asked one of our millennial subjects during this study, to talk to us and we were interviewing them, they actually, we told them, hey, if you need to check your phone, do something on your computer, go for it. We'll just pause and observe you. Anytime they heard the phone ring, not even saw who it was, just heard that first ringtone, they said to us, pause, we got to stop this. It's an emergency. Why? Millennials hate the phone. It doesn't allow them to multitask. But when somebody really needs to get through for something that's incredibly important, in one example, it was someone's about to buy your duplicate prom dress, but hey, it's all relative. We know that caller is really prioritizing the communication, and that it's communicated to the millennial just by the medium itself. Whereas if you move toward the social graph, which is that purple cloud sort of object up in the top right corner, that's where millennials are really understanding that it's a public environment, and different types of content will serve them better there. They'll get a better experience if they use that there. We have actually a relatively strong understanding of what topics millennials consider public and private. Now you can see that mini digital publicist, mini digital brand steward coming to life within the public part of the spectrum in terms of the fact that all of these topics are relatively positive or factual. Whereas the private end of the spectrum, those topics are a little stickier, a little more controversial. Millennials really like to keep it light online. And again, that makes sense if you have 2,000 friends, which range from your bio partner to your aunt who's always on Farmville to the rest of your group of friends. What's interesting here, and we like to point this out, is the placement of sexual orientation and politics, political opinions. Now for millennials, you can see that they've grown up in a different time, and sexual orientation is considered more of a fact for this generation than a point of contention. It would be really interesting to have done this type of research among baby boomers when they were 17. We have a hunch that these two might be flipped, just based on the changing cultural environment. And this shows, again, that millennials are ushering in major cultural changes. Another piece that's really important to point out is that millennials, as I mentioned, are using language in very creative ways to get what they need within these digital communication platforms. The amazing, amazing researcher Dana Boyd, who I'm sure some of you are familiar with, has a concept that I'm going to probably articulate very poorly, but it's essentially the idea of social steganography, whereby a digital user will employ veiled language in a network public so that only a few people in a very public group understand what they're talking about. The classic millennial example we hear all the time is posting lyrics to kind of red flag a bad day or needing help or needing support from friends. So let's say a millennial breaks up with her boyfriend, is kind of bummed about it. She'll post a song that allows her 5 closest friends to know, hey, something happened, I need your support. But that aunt who's on Farmville just thinks she's kind of singing on Facebook. So you can see how there's a really strong sense of not only what tools are best for which circumstances, but how to make the most of each of those tools. So for brands, I think in terms of channel planning, there's a really interesting takeaway in terms of how millennials are optimizing their communication. Millennials understand that sometimes one platform is good for just one thing, and that should be okay. If you have a strong channel strategy online and have specific goals for each channel, understanding what they do best, you're golden. And that's a really big takeaway, I think, that we can learn from millennials. Next up, likeaholism. So based on other studies that we've done at MTV, we understand that millennials are relatively accustomed to a pretty steady stream of positive feedback just by virtue of the way that they grew up. But this can be very much amplified in the digital space, as I mentioned before. If anyone can like a photo you post within seconds all around the world, that's positive. That feels pretty good. But then it keeps feeling pretty good, and all of a sudden you're on a bit of a gerbil wheel, and we kind of see a dynamic of a little bit of addictive behavior on occasion. We also see millennials speaking about feedback and digital interaction almost as a substance, as you see here, Colin's quote. And there's this growing sense among especially millennials who are kind of aging into their first job, early 20s, that they need to start kind of reining in what they're doing and making sure that they're having a successful experience by not giving too much. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And we know that millennials really thrive on feedback online. There's an expectation of feedback that I think is unprecedented compared to other generations. They also derive confidence from getting responses online, and they really do, when they speak about it, they speak about it more in terms of feeling connected, feeling part of a community, and that's significant. And also you can see that digital publicist coming out again. I'm always aware of how people respond to me. So not only are they optimizing and putting that best slice of their self outward when they're curating the identity, but on the back end, they're doing some analytics to see how that went, how the feedback went, and perhaps optimizing further. Fascinating. However, when the feedback doesn't come, it can be a little bit anxiety-provoking for some millennials. Significantly, about a quarter feel alone if others don't respond. Now, before we get up in arms about this, because that does sound like a very strong statement, it actually relates to how millennials have a much more equalized sense of the value of in real-life communication versus digital communication, that convergence again. So if I were walking down the hallway and my colleague Allison, who's here today, and I waved to her, and then she walked right by me, which she would never do, I would feel completely confused by not getting a response from her. And so would a millennial in the digital space when they didn't get the feedback on that post from a friend or when they post to a friend's wall. It shows you, again, that interconnectedness of the real life and digital life for millennials and how significant it is and how much of a connection they feel to their friends, both in person and online. So that convergence again. For brands, I think the most important takeaway is the amount of resources and energy it takes to successfully participate in the high feedback, high engagement levels of millennial digital culture. They really require a depth of engagement that is not seen before in other generations. And it's incredibly important to staff up for that, be really flexible in terms of your strategy, and always know that millennials are going to want more of you because they're so engaged. It's so much a rooted core of how they live and how they thrive. Next up, DigiCat. 4 rules or sort of principles that millennials are developing over time together to be successful digital citizens. And I'll go into each of these in depth. Also happy to chat during the Q&A, I'm sure, too. So first up is learn the rules. Next up, pace yourself. Third is avoid controversy. And finally, guard your future. And we'll go into depth into these now. So first up, learn the rules. Millennials have joined, as I mentioned before, they've been there at the launch of basically every new digital product. They're really excited to join that stuff. I couldn't count the number of accounts that I have across various platforms and communities. It would be too much for me. But at the same time, because they've had to join so many communities in such rapid succession, they've become these amazing personal level digital anthropologists. They really lean back and take in what the community is about, the power dynamics, how things work, how to get the best experience before they jump in and start to play, which is a big difference between other generations from what we've noticed. Part of this is, again, because they want to get that best experience, they're managing their brand, want to really have a positive sense of themselves online, but also they want to avoid pitfalls. As we know, there's no Emily Post for this generation online. So they're really kind of sometimes learning by negative experiences of others in their friendship groups, such as this statistic speaks to. Next up is pace yourself. This is the classic James Dean nonchalance brought to the millennial digital adolescents 24/7. So if you've got a smartphone in your pocket at all moments of the day, that's a pretty significant piece of power that you have to either make some great stuff happen or maybe have some repercussions for responding too quickly. And I feel like all of us having smartphones in our pockets have been there. Should I reply now? Should I wait? Et cetera. But for millennials, it causes a lot of anxiety. Now let's contrast this to what we learned about likeaholism. So wanting all of this feedback, really having a strong desire for all this feedback, but then being a little bit hesitant to be there to give it. So you can see these are norms that millennials are working out in real time. Finally, avoid controversy. So we know, based on that public-private content continuum that I shared with you earlier, millennials really like to keep it light online. And it's okay to post a few humorous content pieces every once in a while, but if you're that guy who keeps posting the controversial stuff, it's going to get you knocked off the feed into social Siberia. Interestingly for us, yeah, it's true, they call it that. Interestingly for us as a content company, MTV Viacom, we found a brand new sort of idea called Proxy Opinions. So a millennial, obviously very in tune with smart, funny content. Let's pick on Colbert Report, for instance. If a millennial believes or disagrees, whatever, has an opinion about something that Mr. Colbert posts the night before, or shares the night before on the show, the next day they might post that video content, not only to express their opinion while mitigating any risk of sounding like they're ranting or starting World War III in millennial speak, but actually they also gain a net positive because they're adding value and smart, funny humor into their social network and gaining social currency in return. So pretty interesting dynamic. Next slide. Just tech snafus all over the place today. Sorry, guys. Is there anyone who could do the next slide for me? Oh, OK. So this is actually speaking to there we go, guard your future. Thank you. Guard your future. So we understand that millennials, actually, this is probably most surprising to many audiences. Millennials are extremely careful about what they post. And they understand the permanence of everything they're doing. Essentially, they've articulated to us in our study that they know that they're creating a permanent autobiography that will follow them throughout their lives. Now, what's interesting, too, is that we see this strong agreement with trying hard not to make mistakes in the digital space. What's different here is what previous generations consider mistakes versus what millennials consider mistakes. And that's a really strong difference. Just like they're ushering in changes in terms of what's public and private, equalization in terms of how they feel about in real life communication and digital communication, what counts as a mistake online is quite different for this group, and that's something we're actually exploring in more depth in our research. So for brands, oh, and here's a quick quote just to kind of bring some flavor to it before we get into the video, but Cameron, who's 17, says, "The internet is forever. You might as well be remembered in good terms." At 17, he's really significantly engaged in terms of making sure that his autobiography, his permanent record, is as he wants it to be. Now, right now, it's a party guy, so okay, that might change a little bit, but at the same time, he knows everything that he's leaving as a trail that can be found. So for brands, I think the biggest takeaway is that active pacing. At MTV, for our social media platforms, number 5 on Facebook, by the way, we are really, really concerned about keeping our feed full of value and not flooding our feed. So making sure that every word, every post that we put up there is bringing value to those that follow us. And also that we're not over-flooding our followers and making sure that we're not becoming that person who talks too much and lands in social Siberia. And that's something that to be really attuned to, no matter whether your customer base is millennials or beyond. What kind of tolerance do they have for communication volume? And making sure that you're participating and engaging in a way that resonates with their group's communication styles. So I hope the real takeaway for everyone is that for millennials, digital life and real life are essentially one and the same at this point. They're leading the way for the rest of us who are also negotiating all these new changes together. But we also wanted to know how they feel about it. So I'll share a short film with you in a sec, but just quickly, for millennials, it's really a net positive. We do see a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of sense of feeling overexposed, but at the same time, millennials really feel like they're gaining efficiency, they feel empowered. We saw that badge value earlier about feeling like they're the most savvy, most digitally savvy generation, so it's really a part of this generation's identity. But don't take it from me. We're about to show you this film that really brings to life a lot of the ethnographic research we did, and I guess enjoy the show, and thanks so much.
Personally, I'm addicted to technology.
It actually irritates me, the fact that I can't put my phone down.
I'm on Twitter like all day. I tweet every like 5 minutes.
All of these new gadgets, almost like prosthetic extensions of themselves.
You definitely are the author of what gets put out there.
How did I honestly live without Facebook?
Chatting allows you to avoid awkward silences.
Some people, they don't control their online life.
You want to portray like kind of a positive image.
I love editing photos. You can airbrush yourself, you can change the color of your hair, put makeup on. So like I could take a photo, I completely hate the original copy, and then turn it in and be like, I like that now.
You're in a lot more control, so you can take the things either that you are and magnify them, or the things that you want to be and completely fabricate them.
My online me, I'm just kind of funnier, but like, I don't know, there's some stuff you wouldn't put up there. Like I've never put baby pictures or something like that. Like, well, if I had a baby.
You always want to get a lot of comments. You want a lot of likes and you want a lot of comments. I mean, at least I do. Seeing who likes it and seeing who comments on it shows that, it's kind of, people are recognizing it.
I usually immediately get like someone writing back on my wall or commenting it.
I be feeling famous sometimes when I'm on Twitter. Like there's a couple people that retweet like everything I say.
Well, everyone wants to be loved. They say in the fact that when you have like the incoming text messages, you have like the Facebook messages, you have all this technology surrounding you. Like even if it's an email, it's still someone trying to communicate to you. So there's something invigorating about that someone's trying to reach out to you. So you naturally, your instinct is, well, someone wants to talk to me.
And so they're building their own language for it, they're building their own conceptual framework for it. They're ahead of the older generations. They can't really be taught from folks like us because they know more about this than we do. It's like the air they breathe in some ways.
It's a lot of the same rules that apply in real life, apply online. You just have to be a little cautious because it's the internet, and once you put it on there, it's out there.
If you're that person who's always like adding statuses and always adding photos, what you upload and what you say isn't going to be taken as seriously.
I'm not going to post something about, politics or like religion or You know, just those subjects that bring about so much debate.
Like, I think your wall is like more for like friendly things, like, hey, how are you? I miss you. Song lyrics or something like that.
I have a secret identity as well, I guess you could say. Like, you have the Facebook side where everyone sees. That's how you're portrayed. And then you have like your true identity, which your closer friends know and stuff. But you don't really see it that often on like a social networking site.
It's me, but it's just the outer shell. It's not like, you know, all of me. I don't, you know, I kind of filter myself.
Even now when I'm bored, I'll just go online and just see what are people up to or what activities are they doing now. But I don't actually talk to them.
Technology can be great if people use it to interact with people more in real life. You know, when you become so disconnected, I think people will be like, what happened?
It's a substance, and it depends on the person who uses it. That depends if it does harm or good or is neutral.
It's either you're going to get with it or you're going to get lost. Like, more and more things are being like invented every single day, making things easier for us.
The only way of being, real or otherwise, in the 21st century is going to be a mode of existence in and through all this technology.